The Discourse starts right now with Cheryl Oates and Erika Barudis.
Welcome back to The Discourse. We are reporting on E+1. The last ballots have just been counted. We have a red country. Once again, the Liberals will form a minority government. And once again, we have a very blue Alberta. Almost every single riding in Alberta voted Conservative last night. Not the election result that I think any party was looking for out of this campaign. Why don't we just start with a crushing night for the Conservatives, Erika? How's your team feeling today?
Everyone was a loser yesterday. Maybe not democracy and definitely not Donald Trump. But the Conservatives did not form government, even though for the better part of a year, they have been projected to do so. There's for a very significant period of time, this was the Conservatives' victory lap until recently with the change of Liberals. But coming back to the Liberals, they wanted a majority, and they are still in the same spot where they have to make deals in order to hold the confidence of Canadians. The NDP was decimated. I think this is the lowest number since the 1950s, including Jagmeet Singh losing his seat, Pierre Poilievre losing his seat to come back to Conservatives, and the Bloc actually going down. So nobody really got what they want, except I think Donald Trump is looking at the map of how this election came out and was like, I like how this is playing out. This election went how I wanted. So he might be the only person smiling today, because I think whether there is silver linings of Conservatives increasing seats, Liberals increasing seats, remaining in power, nobody really got what I think they were going into it when they dropped this writ in this election.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously, 169 seats for the Liberals, falling 3 seats short of what would be, a very tedious majority government. And now the NDP, although, yes, absolutely agree, a crushing defeat for the NDP, Jagmeet Singh losing his seat and resigning as leader last night, but does make the party and its 7 seats especially relevant as it once again holds the balance of power in Parliament.
Which is actually interesting because you were doing media yesterday. I was doing media. I was on a panel, which I might never do again because I'm even sick of hearing myself, but was going through as the whole scenario, Atlantic Canada looked actually way different than I think projections. It was not like 2015 where it was just red all the way across. Conservatives were gaining seats. Not much surprise in Quebec and Ontario. And I was, like you said, even surprised about the blue wave that didn't form government, but that started in Manitoba and actually went all the way through to lots of BC, not just interior, but as you were getting out, much is probably attributed to the collapse of the NDP and the union blue collar actually voting, ended up voting strategically for Conservatives as opposed to anyone else. But it was a wild night, and all these scenarios, do they form it with the Bloc? Because at one point that was the only way to majority. And then the NDP was starting to gain some seats kind of in, once you hit BC, and those were the last polls by half an hour to close. So every scenario, I think people were trying to map out, what does holding government look like? And then coining it out of the chess game of, if the Bloc is the path to having a coalition, what does that mean for Alberta versus NDP? So we're kind of after millions of dollars spent and lots of fundraising and lots of pounding pavement by all parties, we're back to kind of where we started, minus Jagmeet Singh.
Yes, it's true. And actually, if you watched Atlantic Canada, yes, it looked like way more Conservative vote there than was expected. The poll aggregators had suggested that it was possible for the Liberals to nearly sweep Atlantic Canada. But some of those seats did flip back in advanced polls and special ballots. And that's why you saw what had been quite a tight race between the Conservatives and the Liberals when a lot of people went to bed. That's why you saw that gap sort of widen as those advanced votes started going in. The Liberal numbers just ticked up and actually continued to tick up even this morning.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, because last night I texted you, I was like, Pierre lost his, or PP lost his seat. And you're like, advanced polls are still like, you reminded me. And I was like, yeah, but Liberals traditionally have a better advanced poll. For Pierre Poilievre, 44,000 advanced polls, 40% of his vote. But we also saw a jump to 7 million people or something doing advanced polls. So like, maybe let's break that down about what that meant for all of us when we went to sleep versus maybe why the polls are so different or some of those really close races ended up being not so close in the end.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. The Conservatives, I never thought the Conservatives were winning on the advance vote. I texted you about the outstanding votes in Poilievre's riding because I was trying to be a nice friend last night.
I'm like, she's out to lunch.
I didn't actually think he was going to win in the advance vote. Like, I mean, the gap was only going to widen.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you. I missed that because I was just like, I get that, but like at the same time, we never win on special ballots in advance votes. Okay, well, thank you.
But I was like, nice. There's still a lot of vote left to be counted. That's the kind of thing you say.
I mean, I think I said nice things to you in Saskatchewan on election day. So, we do that. I'm just sorry I missed that. I felt that. Are you losing today? Well, we're 1 for 1 now. Look at us.
Yeah. And I wonder too, like if you look at this and you look at, all the polls predicted the Liberals to do much better than they did last night. They weren't wrong in the sense that we are with the Liberals for a fourth term now. But they did predict, most of them, a majority government. Like we had aggregators predicting into the 190s still in this last week. 189, I think, was CBC's poll tracker. And they fell far short of that. But you did see, the peak sort of came mid-campaign when the issues with the United States were front of mind for people. And that really trailed off. And sometimes, it's hard for the polls to stay in front of actual opinion of the general public. And so that really did, I think, take quite a sharp dive as people moved their mind more to affordability than Trump tariffs in the final week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that closed the gap. I went on the record last night before polls closed that I thought it was a Liberal majority because I just had that feeling in my gut. It kind of felt like 2050, not as intense. And I didn't think Alberta was maybe going to go that way or like, the projection of 7 seats in Alberta. I said that, and maybe it was just me being a pessimist so that now today I'm like, haha, we're only a minority. But I also felt that like we were losing when I was out at Strong and Free / Broadbent for work because I do that now. I thought we lost. And so it was more like about how much. So I think that there is a silver lining that the Conservatives actually did increase their seat count. This is the highest seat count they've had since the 80s, I believe. You're flirting around 120, 119, like kind of for the last since Harper. And now we've jumped up into the 140s. There is a silver lining that we gained, but different from what we thought a year ago. I don't know. Yeah, it's been
It's important to take those pieces. Like I made these same cases when we lost the 2023 election in Alberta. Like, yes, of course, it's devastating to lose, especially when you sit ahead in the polls. And there's lots of parallels between what happened with the NDP in Alberta in 23 and what happened with the Conservatives in this election. We were sitting way ahead in the polls in Alberta and we lost the election. But, in hindsight, like I took a lot of weight in terms of the NDP success. We built our party. We continue to grow our seats. We won the popular vote in Calgary. Like the CPC can continue to make those arguments as well. Like, yes, it didn't get all the way there, but people in the party shouldn't be saying like, throw their hands up in the air. This was all a loss because, I don't usually agree with Poilievre, but I do agree that change takes time. And that's what he said last night. Like, you don't always get to do it in your one shot. And it's rare that I feel empathy towards the Conservatives, but I did really feel nostalgic about Alberta 2023 when I heard it.
Yeah, I definitely think it was a good concession speech, like the right tone, and just about how proud he was of the team. I think that there's obviously like a lot, and even between filming and time that it airs, there's speculation that someone in Alberta will be stepping aside and that he will be running to stay on as leader, as well as then having a by-election where he can then be in the House to hold the government accountable. So, there's lots of pieces of what does this look like for Pierre. I definitely think behind the scenes, there's going to be some knives out. I mean, we've already seen some knives within our own party, much to my chagrin and frustration that traditional media decided to cover that over some other things. But, we've seen some infighting, and that is quite typical, unfortunately, of sometimes the Conservatives post-election. The Constitution does, like in our party, does call for a leadership review should you fail to form government after a general election, but that's not for some time. We've never usually made it there after losing because the leader either resigns or is pushed out by caucus. But that wasn't the sentiment I got last night. And obviously I wasn't on the ground, but I think that message of change does take time is actually something that I think, and the willingness for people to step aside shows that I think Pierre's actually well positioned to maybe survive what typically happens to conservative leaders, and maybe make it through and be able to keep pushing, because now with the minority, it's not guaranteed 4 years.
I mean, I have heard for a long time that there are people in the party that had said, like, Poilievre has run such a purist conservative campaign that there's no way the party will push him out even if he does lose. But watching last night, I find that a little bit hard to believe. Like, you saw the MP, the newly elected MP from Ontario, take a run at Doug Ford.
Giovanni?
Yes, and just like light up Doug Ford. I do not see any benefit to doing that unless you are yourself planning to make a run for leadership. Like, that was a make my name known last night kind of move. And I mean, history tells us in jurisdictions across the country that Conservatives have no problem eating their own. And so as these kind of fractures, we saw problems with Ford, we saw problems with Houston, as these kind of fractures exist in a party that did not meet the expectations of its membership, I find it hard to believe that Poilievre will withstand that.
I think that's funny because I saw it was shared with me, like Jagmeet Giovanni, who, for context, worked for Doug Ford, is then worked for, I think it was Canada Strong and Free or some kind of independent conservative movement, then ran as a candidate under Pierre Poilievre, really well spoken, maybe not in that moment, but like traditionally has been a very good voice, especially in media. I think this was like emotions got the best of him. He went kind of rogue. I, in that moment, kind of appreciated the sentiment because I was like, yeah, as we've shared on this podcast, I think Doug Ford has not been helpful to the movement. And I'm like, you're not even a conservative. Shut up. And like rumors that Doug Ford wants to run, I saw that as almost just like someone really trying to protect their friend and defend them. I think it was poorly articulated and poor, but I don't see that as Jagmeet coming, maybe that's not what you meant, but like coming for Pierre's job.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. Okay. But I was like, I didn't even see that. So now that you say it, I'm like, okay, like I'll go back and watch it again and see. But in that moment, I was just like, oh, this is like a emotional best friend being like, you want to fight? You want to fight? I'll fight you. And like pushing the friend back and like stepping up and swinging a punch, because it was a lot of emotions. But now seeing like there is a huge support from just chatter and speculation that there's an opportunity for him to run in God's country, that he might have some saving grace. And you know what, as a conservative, like we've done this so many times. He grew the party, like you said, there's some silver linings or some victories that he could claim for the Conservatives. So I hope that's not the case, because I just don't want to go through another leadership. And I think Pierre's kind of found a good spot for where the Conservative Party wants to focus.
But he does need a seat. Because part of his power is how effective he is in the House. And he just loses so much credibility if he does not have a seat in the House and he can't actually be the leader of the opposition in the House. So
yeah, how well has that worked for Nenshi?
Well, exactly. But we've made this point on behalf of the Alberta Democrats as well. Rumor has it, Edmonton Griesbach.
I've heard Edmonton Griesbach. I've heard some Calgary folks. I saw the Griesbach and like great on Kerry Diot for running. I don't think after Kerry Diot just sat on the sidelines for 4 years that he wants to then go and now give up his seat. Like he's been waiting a real long time to get his job back. And you never know.
Like it's not a safe seat, right? Like it has flipped in the last 2 elections. So I'm not sure it's like the best. Like if someone's going to give up their seat for the leader, it should probably be a safe seat. Like that would be really embarrassing.
Yeah, and I think that just even how Edmonton's structured from a conservative blanket without really strong conservative pockets, Griesbach is definitely, I think, went so strong blue only because of the collapse of the NDP. Because it was NDP, it wasn't Liberal.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise him to maybe run in that spot. But there's a few more that I think could be very appealing for him in the West, as we've seen based on the color of the map. What does this mean for Jagmeet? Like, and what does it mean for your party? I'm curious because who's the leader? I've heard rumor that Heather McPherson could be the leader or interim leader. I guess that depends what your rules look like. But what does that mean? Because yeah, he stepped down. Pierre didn't step down last night.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Jagmeet has now gone through 3 elections. With this kind of result in the third election, I don't think anyone was super surprised to see him offer his resignation last night. Like 7 seats is crushing. Like that is a crushing defeat for the NDP. We didn't hold the incumbents. We didn't hold party status. That's not to say that the NDP will not continue to be consequential. Like we said, they now hold the balance of power in this parliament and will be the difference between the government passing any confidence measures, including the budget. So I have to believe that we learned some hard lessons from the last confidence and supply agreement, and that this time will look much different and will not sacrifice our relevance for the sake of the stability of the government. But I mean, let's see. The dynamics are completely different now. In terms of the party going forward, like I have no doubt in my mind that the NDP will rebuild. And this will be, a new chapter, and hopefully will be more representative of the thousands and thousands and thousands of members who exist in Western Canada, where we have a BC NDP government in British Columbia, in Manitoba, 2 really strong NDP oppositions in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Like I think this will be a great new chapter for the federal party. And I don't know what the leadership will look like. Heather McPherson would make an awesome candidate, but I think the NDP is going to take some time to set some rules and think about what the contest looks like. And I hope lots of great candidates enter, because I would love to see a really robust conversation where the whole country feels happy about the leader that's put in place.
Yeah, it's interesting because you've got British Columbia and Manitoba that federally are quite, significantly blue in comparison to how they vote provincially. Wab Canoe is like a name that's been thrown around. I don't know him. I know you've done some work. I don't know Carla Beck either, but like, I think from what I know about Wab Canoe is he's charismatic, right? Like regardless of what side, and even other premiers have said, he's pretty good. He's overcome some challenges and, like his skeletons are out. So could he be a good candidate? But does that also impact, I guess like even the relationship with the federal conservative or federal NDP? Because you guys are going through that in Alberta right now.
Yeah, I mean, people have asked me about Wab Canoe and Carla Beck. Like I don't know. I don't know if that's their plan this time around. I've heard lots of people say it's a good idea. Truthfully, like Wab Canoe is leading a very stable, reforming government right now in Manitoba in his first term. Like I do find it hard to believe that he doesn't plan to stay on and get his party reelected, whether he has federal aspirations or not. And Carla Beck's doing the same thing. She came within 4 seats of becoming the premier of Saskatchewan in the last election, and I think she plans to stick it out and become premier in the next election. So I don't really think that those are realistic ideas about the future of the federal party. But, the well is a lot deeper than that. And there is a lot of great people out there who have either held office previously or have been a part of the party or have been a part of the membership for a long time. And I don't think there'll be a shortage of names put forward.
Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know, again, your rules. I don't know if they are set in stone, but they'll figure all of that out.
Yeah.
So they'll probably, and that's where maybe Heather McPherson's name has been buzzing because she's got a stronghold in Alberta. She's been around the block for a long time as maybe interim leader versus a candidate. But again, we'll find that out. Do you think, maybe this is me putting on my tin hat, that at the point that Jagmeet Singh knew he wasn't going to win, like increase seats or that they were on a default, that he just like threw away his own seat. So he has reason to walk away. He's got his pension. So do you think that that was also part of his exit strategy, or because his concession speech was like pretty standard?
Do I think that he like threw
Sabotaged
his own seat?
himself.
No, I don't think he I don't think he sabotaged his
Looked
own
like
seat.
he did.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so-
I don't think that. I think that the NDP like it was a narrow window to the path to maintaining official party status. I think Jagmeet Singh desperately wanted to maintain party status, and the road to party status included Jagmeet Singh's seat. So I absolutely do not think that he sabotaged his own seat.
Okay, just curious because he was kind of like looked relieved. He was like, "Hey, I'm out, got my pension, like my party is down." The other thing is, do you think that in hindsight, that either the NDP wishes they would have run when the relationship with the Liberals was kind of falling apart, when they were polling at 22 in June, July of last year, even last fall when they were like getting their weird breakup? Do you think that in hindsight they wish that they pulled the trigger then?
No. And Jagmeet Singh was really clear about this publicly. There's a whole article about it in the Toronto Star if anybody wants to read the longer version. But essentially, like he's saying, like, yeah, I know we could have brought down this government earlier, and if we had, the NDP would. I mean, he didn't say this at the time, but it would have party status. The NDP would have won a lot more seats. The NDP likely would have kept their incumbents. But that probably would have meant that Pierre Poilievre would have been prime minister. And Jagmeet Singh is basically saying, like, I didn't want that. That wasn't worth it. Partly because just Pierre Poilievre as prime minister would change a lot of things in the country, but specifically things that the NDP had fought for, like dental care and pharmacare and protecting public health care, those things might be at risk if we brought down the government and elected Pierre Poilievre prime minister. So he was basically saying, I sacrificed a little bit of party power to make sure that those things were safe and for the good of the country, of the future of the country. And New Democrats are totally okay with that. New Democrats, it's not all about party power all the time. We're okay with sacrificing a little bit of poly power and party power for the future of the country.
Yeah, and I did hear you talk about that on Power and Politics when you're talking about like the values and beliefs of New Democrats. I do want to challenge, though, that like there is always going to be that perception about his pension, because that was brought up quite a bit. There's always going to be perception or what his legacy is now going to be. He could have been the guy that saved the country from Justin Trudeau. Like, I think that he's also really risked his own personal brand, whether it was intentional or not. But that's something he's also gonna have to carry. And I wouldn't really give him the strategic cred of I've sacrificed this for the nation versus, and that NDP are okay with it, because the NDP, if you look at the polls, actually fell. That vote went to the Conservatives. So he didn't really achieve what he was maybe trying to achieve, and his legacy might suffer.
I don't think he was trying to save the country from Justin Trudeau. I think he was trying to save the country from Pierre Poilievre. Success. He was trying to make sure that the things that he fought for this term, pharmacare, dental care, protection of public health care, succeeded beyond this parliament. Sounds like that will be the case with Mark Carney as prime minister. And in terms of whether New Democrats are okay with it, like New Democrats, there are lots of New Democrats who didn't vote New Democrat in this election. That is obvious. That doesn't mean that that's their new political home. Like, I would say on the whole, as the party rebuilds itself and becomes strong again for the next election, most of those New Democrat supporters will come home. So he hasn't turned his party away. It was more of a strategic vote this time.
Do you really think that? Because I was going to say Shay Anderson, who you know because he was a former NDP MLA. He was, I think, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, now lives on the island. But he's a union guy. And I was picking his brain on a panel last night about like, okay, so New Democrats are New Democrats. Typically, and you guys always say it's about the working class, about this, but we saw the working class not even go for the quote unquote strategic vote against Pierre Poilievre, but they actually then voted for Pierre. So do you think that when they're going to rebrand and going for their traditional union votes, that like there was some missteps? I look at, these are individuals that, are part of a trade union. They're blue collar. They're, looking to provide for their family on affordability and putting food on their table and having a healthy lifestyle. That maybe the NDP went too far on the wokeism and wasn't focused on the get the hell out of my house and give me a good paycheck, which I think is maybe how I would analyze the vote for the Conservatives. And it might be hard to get back now, harder than you would. So when you're saying they come home, I don't think they're coming home necessarily.
I appreciate the preliminary postmortem on the NDP's election campaign.
You can shit on my party next.
But I think all of those things are on the table. Like, of course, if you see working class voters move to any other party, when you are calling yourself the party of working people, of course you should take a look at that. Of course you should take a look at the language you're using. Of course you should take a look at the demographics that are voting for you and that are not voting for you that historically you had. Like, yeah, that should be a big part of if the NDP is looking for renewal, all of those questions should be asked and all of those questions should be answered, and the next 4 years should be built on what the answers to those questions are.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to shit on you in the sense of like rub it in, because I ain't cheering today either. Like we both are coming out not in the place that we don't want either of our parties to be. But I think it's also important because of the map color that it paints. And I think one of the things that I'm sure our listeners are always keen about, even though thankfully thanks everyone that from across the country and in the United States has grown our audience because of our talks of maybe things outside of Alberta, which we'll continue to do. But it does reflect a lot on what this looks like now for West versus East. And if anything is clear from last night is we do almost have two countries within one.
I think that's
my way of summarizing. That's my way of summarizing. We're divided. You have to say we're divided.
I mean, if you zoom out at the map, for sure, like there's a lot more red in the East than there is in the West. That we're two different countries. Like, I think anyone who voted Conservative, not anyone, most people who voted Conservative in the West are still calling themselves Canadians today.
No, and I didn't say we're not Canadian. It's just
if there's two different countries,
we look like two different countries of our values, our beliefs, even our topography. Like, we're very big. Fine, we're divided. We are very different in our makeups. Regionalism and political cleavages are heightened by the outcome of this election.
Wow.
There you go.
Well, I can't disagree with that.
There you go. Toned her down.
Yeah, and Danielle Smith taking full advantage of that on day one. We've all sort of
expect her to,
as exactly as we would expect her to. I can't help but parse her statement this morning, which I'd actually like to take a look at because it's just crazy to me that a premier of a province could put something like this out. She released a statement. It doesn't even say a congratulatory statement, even though it does start with a congratulations.
It does. I congratulate Mark Carney.
But it wasn't like
on his minority government.
Yeah. So Danielle Smith congratulating Mark Carney for the first sentence, and then moving directly to how awesome Pierre Poilievre is for, in the tweet version, the next 4 tweets. Is that right?
Yeah, it was something like that. It was like something of 4 or 5, and
yeah. Okay, so it basically said Pierre Poilievre is the only person who was great for Alberta and was the only real principled leader standing up there fighting for the right things. The crazy part to me about this is that after she talks about how awesome Pierre Poilievre is, she basically says that the other leaders, she says, while Liberals and New Democrats demeaned and demonized Albertans, our values, and our industry for political gain, Mr. Poilievre made empowering Albertans in our energy sector a cornerstone of his campaign. That is crazy. Like, to think, okay, one, it's not in anybody's interest. It's not in the NDP's interest or the Liberals' interest to demean and demonize any province, any voter, any piece of the electorate during a campaign. To suggest that either of the parties did that is lunacy.
I think if she just removed some of it, of just like our energy sector, I think was exploited. It was taken for granted. It was all of these things. So maybe we're getting into semantics of demonize as a synonym, but
the crazier part is, can I just tell you what the crazier part of this is?
Sure.
That after she says that the new prime minister of the country, now with a full mandate of the country, demonized what he's calling his home province then literally in the next breath, if this statement could breathe, as Premier, I invite the Prime Minister to immediately commence working with our government to reset the relationship between Ottawa and Alberta with meaningful action. Reset the relationship? Like, what kind of an olive branch is that?
Cheryl, this is called a shit sandwich. That's what we do, but in politics. But no, I mean, it's not surprising that she's not happy with this outcome. It's not surprising that a lot of Albertans are frustrated with the outcome. I mean, from voter the way that the polls and the colors and the seats went, absolutely, there is frustration. She rightfully so congratulate both. I don't freaking care. Congratulate the NDP for shit in the bed. I don't like whatever. I'm not going to get into caring about that. But I think the biggest thing for me is I will not permit the status quo to continue. If I was her, I would have just wrote, congratulations, Mark Carney. Congratulations to Pierre Poilievre for growing your party. Alberta's position is pretty clear. Like our position on our relationship with the federal government is pretty clear. I welcome that conversation. Like, I don't want her to back down. I want her to say,
but she didn't need to do this. I agree with you.
Quite
She didn't
lengthy.
need to do this.
Yeah.
She could have just said, like, it's day one of a new relationship. You know what I want and I need because I've never stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
Let me see what you got.
Right. I was going to read Scott Moe. So Scott Moe says, I want to congratulate Prime Minister Mark Carney and all the leaders and candidates, their families and volunteers for hard-fought campaigns. Great. Saskatchewan voters sent a strong message by voting for change. I will have more to say later today. How do you feel about that? I like that.
I thought that was quite diplomatic. And we all know Danielle Smith is capable of diplomacy. So where was it?
Yeah.
Like,
I do think the sentiment maybe and frustration in Alberta, as we've seen, is maybe higher than Saskatchewan. I don't think it needed this novel. Send that note to Pierre. But I do not think that she needs to back down on what Albertans would like to see happen.
But I'm not even saying back down. I'm saying, do you want to make progress on your asks, or do you want to continue to stomp your feet on a big stage about your asks? Yeah. Because if it's the latter, then just keep trying not to make friends.
Do you know what I would have loved if she took like that original thing of the conditions and been like, still here to chat about that.
Circling back on this email.
Yeah. Just bringing this to the top of your Twitter thread, I think
that would have been like cute. She could have easily done that.
I'm not there anymore. Yeah. But maybe we'll see that happen. Like, hey, psst, congrats. Yeah. But read below.
But I mean, despite the fact that Albertans didn't overwhelmingly vote for Mark Carney, I do think he's going to make an effort. Like, if the Liberals want to be successful, they need some kind of a reputational reset. And that matters in Alberta, even if they don't hold more than 2 seats in Alberta. So, I do think Mark Carney has to come to the table. Danielle Smith has to let him come to the table.
Yep. No, and I think it would be reasonable for, a cohesive approach by the Western provinces by, let's just talk about because Western alienation is a thing, and it is called that in what political cleavages and regionalization is because it's true. It's not necessarily anyone's fault, but how our constitution was structured when we were itty bitty, and over 150 years ago. So because our little roadmap doesn't work as perfectly as maybe we wanted it to, and there is questions of jurisdictional overlap, federal interference, all these things. Let's talk about what it looks like for these provinces. And I do think he's got work to do. I'm optimistic that he'll come and find a solution. He said to her, C-69 is going to be amended or repealed, and then said later on in the campaign it's not. So I think that's a big clarification. What are you doing to make our because even in his speech last night would not say pipelines, and he said conventional energy, and his crowd went silent. So it's that
it's not really an applause line.
Well, but it was we're looking for renewable and conventional, but they were clapping at everything, and then we're almost you saw this woman behind him being so I don't know, you have to remember it's the same team really trying for my dad not to swear. Same team as Trudeau had. So it's like you also have to convince your caucus too. So he's got a big job. Like I do not envy the role of like trying to manage this caucus, trying to pick your cabinet to give a good broad perspective when you do have a concentrated sea of red, and then trying to make peace and friends with what is, like I said, a very divided country right now. Well, also navigating stuff in the US. He walked into a real big job.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I mean, I think like Danielle Smith has now said she's going to start a conversation with Albertans in the same statement, going back to the same wacky statement she put out. This was like tweet 6 or 7.
Are we on page 7? Just kidding.
Yeah. Danielle Smith said she's about to start a conversation with Albertans about what can we do to protect Alberta from Ottawa's attacks, which is wild language to me.
I think Ottawa does attack us, and maybe, sure, like we can criticize her for softening it down, but like my phone from people that I never thought would be like, I'm so fed up. I can't believe this. Like people that I don't even think vote, like I know are not conservatives, are just like, I think it's, again, looking at the map and seeing that we're divided. It's like, what do we do now? What do we do as a province? What do we do? Like there
what
better
is there
be
to
some
do?
change.
Like, what is there to do? Like,
I don't think people want to sit on their hands
list?
On the demands. I think it's a lot about our energy sector. Oh.
But like, if we're talking about how to protect Canada or protect Alberta, from Ottawa, like we already have sovereignty within a United Canada Act. We already have the startings of our own police force. We've had the conversation about pensions. We have our own border security, whatever we're doing down there. What else? What else could we possibly add to this mix?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a clear divide. Like, I think there's two camps. I think there's one that's like the Constitution is never going to work for us. So what does that look like because of the natural resources versus trade and export overlap with the provincial and federal government? I think there are people that are like, this Constitution is broken. I think there's also people that are like, okay, we now need our federal government to want to stay in their lane, and let's figure out what this looks like from economic corridors. Like we want a plan of what we think would be a quote unquote fair deal. I don't want another fair deal panel. Don't get me wrong. I don't want another one in any way, shape, or form. I don't know what her conversation. It is a fair deal.
We don't have deal on what? Like pipelines? Well,
we can't have like equalization reform. Let's just be honest. Like that is kind of off the table in the sense of like how we'd have to open up the Constitution. That's not going to happen because if it did, we'd want Senate reform too. But there's a lot of things within our Constitution that just are really hard to dissect right now, like Section 91, 92, 92A, all the stuff that is about like federal-provincial. So I think it's like we're at a place of what does that look like? I don't know what she's exactly saying, but from conversations, people are like, I really don't feel like I'm a part of this country, or I'm so like, what does this mean for West versus East? Like we've got two camps in our country. How do we navigate that? I don't think that there's a huge uptake for like Alberta 51. Because I don't think a lot of people want to join the US, but I've never seen this appetite for what else do we have within our powers to make us feel treated. Like it's like a toxic relationship where finally we're like, okay, we need to break up, or we need to either fix this relationship because it's just not working. And it might be for some people we need to break up, but some it might be like, let's go to therapy. For others, it might be like, how do we live and cohabitate on different floors? Who knows? But I do think there's a lot of people, and I've heard from them today about the frustration of how our country operates and is structured. And I don't think that's the fault of the Liberals or the Conservatives or the NDP. That's just how our Constitution is unfolding in real modern times.
Okay. Well, that will be really interesting. I'm
You're like, I don't care, but I do think it's. I mean, real.
I just don't relate.
I don't relate.
I'm not trying to dismiss the feelings of people who feel that way, but I just don't relate to it. And I
didn't think I've progressively grown in my sentiment of just being like, man, this is really unfair. It's like a very unhealthy relationship. I would love for it to figure itself out and work. But that sentiment, not maybe the separatist sentiment, but that sentiment is, I'm watching it grow.
And I hope that that's a line that we can draw. Like, I think it's fine for Alberta to have a conversation about like what does Alberta need to feel heard in modern times. I think that's a fine conversation to have, and hasn't been really like had in a meaningful way in a long time. But there's such a thin line between having that conversation and talking about separation. And for many people, well, not many people, for a vocal minority of people, that line is already blurred.
Yeah,
And
I think whatever the government shouldn't, I don't think should lead that conversation. I also think it should be about
the government should just shut down that conversation. Danielle Smith should just say, we are actually not talking about separating. Alberta separating. That is crazy.
Yeah, this is going to be tough for her either way. Like, I think she's now navigating a very unprecedented time in her leadership, right?
And she's not going to say that.
No, but it's true if you look at it, because there's people that would like to hear that. There would be people like to hear, or there's people that want to hear that. There's people that want to hear, I'm not going to step down and not continue to have a healthy relationship. And if that's not the case, then we'll figure out what the relationship needs to be. Not taking things off the table, but not prescribing. And then there's people that are like, shut down the conversation. I'm probably in the middle camp. Which again, that's three camps. It's going to be divided. Like, I think it's going to be tough for Carney, and it's going to be tough for Smith to navigate this.
For sure.
But I do think that there's more people that would be looking at independence versus joining, like being a Puerto Rico versus being the 51st state. And that's something the narrative needs to be controlled there, because that one really changes people's perceptions. And like you said, maybe a more of an alternative group that will run away with that, which won't help the conversation. So I think that's what she needs to shut down, is we're not becoming the 51st state.
Or maybe like, let's just look at the facts and how economically devastating it was for Quebec to consider separating from Canada, even though they didn't. Like, even putting a referendum on the table saying Alberta's going to be independent, Alberta's going to separate. Like, let's just historically look at the corporations and capital that will flee our province if that is a real discussion, which I hope it never is.
Right. But I think you also now have a distinct society that has exemptions within the Constitution, that has a party that gets to be on a platform and run almost as a provincial government to do that. Like, I get what you're saying from the economic standpoint, and I don't think Alberta would ever do that. But Quebec isn't the same as every other province. They are treated very differently. They're like a favorite child of Confederation.
But it was also economically devastating for them to have this discussion.
Yeah, which is why we give them a bunch of money every year. So, I mean, they might argue that they come
well for Alberta.
No, and I don't think Alberta, I just think that's an apples to oranges, but I don't think that Quebec is in a crappy situation right now. Quebec gets handouts from everyone, is a distinct society, has a leader. I'm not saying that's the path of Alberta
should threaten to separate.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, when you're playing out all of the things that Quebec, so no, that's not what I'm saying. Just like play hardball so that you take a hit economically so everyone else pays you, because that's also not our formula of how we would end up living. I'm just saying Quebec is actually not like, I don't ever think that we should be like, oh, poor Quebec, their economy, that our federal government bailed them out. Like, Quebec didn't get hurt. Canada got hurt from that.
Okay.
It's true. No, you have to admit that Quebec didn't get to be the one that got bruises. Our entire Canadian economy. So if we chose to do that, all of Canada gets hurt. Quebec wasn't the poor little sass.
I have no sympathy for any province that tries to separate from the country, faces incredible economic impact, and then deals with the economic consequences. I'm using it as a case study, not to say we feel bad for Quebec, but to say for Albertans who really think this is an option, think about how dramatically the economy would be changed in Alberta if we actually saw this through.
You also have to look at how much that would change and force the Canadian economy. Alberta has already been at a deficit to everyone. We've already been the people that are getting the short end of the stick. So us separating, if it hurts Alberta's economy, it's also going to hurt Canada's. So I don't know how you think that wouldn't send a message, or it's not the card to play about that threat either. Like, I'm so frustrated that our federal government just keeps forgetting that we are the cash cow and already treats us like a lapdog. So how much worse could it get? And I think that's where a lot of people's sentiment is. It's like, yeah, would it hurt our economy? Probably, but it also might make it better because we're not handing out billions of dollars to all these other provinces. So I think it's like people are starting to weigh, it might be a horrible decision. Look what happened to Quebec. But the risk reward, I think people are starting to actually calculate that.
I just have so little to contribute because I just like, I completely sympathize with Albertans feeling like our voices don't matter in Ottawa the way that they should. The idea that Alberta doesn't have a quality of life, the idea that Alberta isn't a wonderful place to live, the idea that somehow like we are so hard done by that we need to fight back and leave the country. I'm sorry. I just like, I do not find this relatable at all. So I hope that this conversation never comes to that. Like, I hope that we are never in the point where we're actually having a conversation about separatism. And if we are, I still think the vast majority of Albertans think of themselves as Canadian first and would never, ever consider separating from the country.
Right. I think if we never had to have that conversation, that would be lovely. Love living here. A lot of people that just lived in Ontario now live here and call us home because we are so wonderful and beautiful and a great place to raise a family. I hope we don't get to that conversation. I'm just being real and saying that like a topic that I never thought would be coming up seems a little bit more front burner right now. And maybe it's just on emotions and this will go away. But I think we're going to really have to focus on what Carney does and says to Canadians and especially Western Canada and how he handles his first 90 days. And also how Smith navigates this. Like we talked about this last week on the podcast. She's going to have to pick a lane eventually. And it is going to speak to maybe more my side of the frustration or yours, or maybe neither. And so it's just, it's politically going to be very fascinating. And I look forward to the content creation it will bring, but also similar to last night, love democracy, but maybe won't be happy with the conversations you have to have after.
Yeah. So that's what we'll be watching for. Can Mark Carney and Danielle Smith see eye to eye? I mean, he could do some big things. He could appoint a energy minister from the West even. It doesn't even have to be Alberta, but he could appoint an energy minister from the West. He could, sit down with Danielle Smith right away. He could start, using more conservative language around energy issues. But I guess, we have probably a week, 10 days, 2 weeks to see the results certified. And then we'll start seeing the government really in motion.
Yeah, and see who are those buddies to keep the government in power. And I'm sure that based on that equation, we'll tell a lot of things about what that means for the West, for Alberta, for the entire nation. And Mr. Trump is, I'm sure, going to lob something our way sooner rather than later because he's got to keep it interesting and about him.
That is true. Well, that's our show for today. We drop new episodes usually Thursday at 5 a.m. around the election. We've kind of messed with that time a little bit just to keep you as current as possible into our inner monologues. But usually every morning at 5 a.m. Across all channels.
So if you haven't already, like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Discourse is hosted by Cheryl Oates and Erika Barudis. Follow on Instagram at The Discourse Pod. Subscribe to The Discourse on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.